fighting a DUI.
Ready? Great. Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody for coming in. I'd like to welcome two Boy Scouts from Troop 46 here to complete a communication badge, so welcome. So we did start at 6 o'clock with some closed session items. We are back in open now. The first thing I'd like to do is ask for move to approve the minutes from our last two meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Judy and Jeff, or Mark. All in favor, any discussion on those minutes? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Randy?
As written.
So I need approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we have public comments. We have one person who would like to speak to us tonight. We also have had several public comments that have been given to us via email. We don't read those, but we have all acknowledged and we have, personally read them. Our person tonight that would like to speak to us is John Dooley, and you may come forward and use the microphone here. If you could limit your comments to 3 minutes, please, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. I kind of apologize for coming in the middle of things here a little bit, but historically, I was a multi-term member of a school board in Apartment City to the east of us here, and we're fairly new residents here. So I did want to just kind of get involved in some things here, but I want to talk about this $800,000 you want to give to Epstein. And I've got a lot of history with those folks, and I'm going to put that to the side. The only thing that really jumped out at me, and I'm only going by the information I read in the newspaper, and that was, at the end of the day, you're going to give an architectural firm $800,000 up front to design a building or whatever, and then use that information to go to referendum. And from what I read, and I could be wrong, what I read was, if the referendum fails, they're assuming that you folks are going to buy into their design, so they'll bring it back again. I just think that's a bad plan. Epstein has no accountability for their $800,000. They can give you a design, and if the public decides to not let the referendum pass because of the design, then they expect you to come back to the public again with that same design, or your $800,000 is out the door. So I'm sure you're maybe past the point of me even talking about this, but hopefully you did your due diligence or whatever, and maybe even look into a different firm and to find out, is this normal? Is this what we should do? I mean, it's not, I know they have to design a building for the site and all those sorts of things, but it's not like you're building the first school in the state of Wisconsin in the last 20 years. So it's not like almost rocket science to design, to spend $800,000 to design this building. So my, I guess not a suggestion even, my thought is, hopefully you've looked at either A, going out and looking at other firms and say, how would you handle this? Or if you have all the confidence in the world that Epstein is the answer, that's great. But then I'd like you to put something in there that would say, hey folks, if this doesn't pass, maybe the community wants a different design. So I'm assuming you'll do that different design for us for nothing. I don't know if that's doable or legal or anything else. I'm just saying practicality-wise. And that's the one thing about the article in the newspaper that just jumped off the page for me, by saying that's the only way that this $800,000 would not be just gone. And another little thing in there that I don't really care for is we have to get this thing going. We just have to get this going in order to, if the referendum would pass, then we've got all this work behind us, and so boy, we can really hit the ground running. And I think that if you have to wait for 6 or 8 months for the building to be completed after the referendum passes, which, by the way, I am fully endorsing it. Not the architectural firm, but fully endorsing the referendum. If I have to wait 6 or 8 months for the referendum, I mean, after it passes, because we lost that time beforehand, that doesn't bother me too much, to be honest with you. You haven't had the building for an awful long time. I think we can get past that part. I know my 3 minutes are up. I thought about that when you said it, but it always reminds me of when I sat in your chairs and I thought, it took me longer to propose to my wife. It's 3 minutes here, for goodness sakes, so,
Has it lasted?
53 years.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, look at, I mean, come on. Gee. I had a lot of other things, but I don't think this is the proper time.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I thought of. I don't like the fact that you would have to buy into their design,
Okay,
and that's it. Otherwise your 800 grand is gone.
thank you,
Maybe it'd be
John.
great design. Maybe you don't have to worry about that. That's my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
John, I'll just give you a little bit of background. We haven't made that decision yet, so your comments are timely. One of the things that we're gonna be doing is we have a special meeting in 2 weeks where we're gonna be talking about the different design, the programs, or kind of what goes into each of the buildings that are being proposed in the referendum. And the other piece that Steve and I'll be laying out at that meeting is your timelines of when you want the school to open. And that's really what drives whether we believe we need to have a reimbursement resolution, depending on when you want the school open. And so depending on that timeline, depends on when you need to start the process. So that's part of the dialogue we've been having, and it's partially prompted by us to bring forward and say, if we want a school open in 2024, it may require us to do some work this summer before the referendum. But that'll be a piece that the board will see at the next meeting, and we'll lay out a couple different pathways as far as what we can consider, including one with and without a resolution, that reimbursement resolution. So you'll see both.
And I think I was just talking about the reimbursement part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that there's another part of that is, how much is the reimbursement gonna
Right.
be?
Right.
Sure.
You know, and maybe, I don't know what legalities there are with looking at different architectural firms.
Mhm.
I'm not so sure that wouldn't be some diligence I'd like to see what folks to be thinking of.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to reports tonight, starting with, I don't think we have any teachers here, doesn't look like it. Board reports this evening, anybody attend anything they'd like to report on?
I'd like to say I had the opportunity over the last month to attended the intermediate school choir concert, the high school choir concert, graduation, project graduation, baseball sectionals we hosted, which was awesome. Soccer sectionals, girls soccer sectionals, and I also attended the dedication to the
Pitch.
Warrior Pitch signage for the gate, sorry, in memory of Bob Ziegler. And that was awesome too. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of positive things going on. It was great to see all those kids singing. That was the best. So it was
Thank
fun
you.
to be able to participate in those things.
Thank you, Katie. Anybody else want to report on? I'd like to do just a couple things. I had the opportunity to meet with a high school student in an AP government course who did a project this year on the benefits of installing additional solar panels on the high school. And that was a very cool experience, and looking at his research and hoping that maybe we can dialogue with what he found as we proceed through our referendum. Another thing that I was able to do is attend a graduation ceremony for 4 students from our competency program. And I got invited because of speaking or allowing them. I was the board member that went to the listening session and got to know the kids, and they invited me to their graduation ceremony that they host at the park. And just want to say what a wonderful tribute the staff did to those 4 individuals in our competency program, and really a wonderful experience. And again, attended the graduation and would just like to congratulate all of our graduates out there. They did a wonderful job this year. Any other comments in that category? Moving on for the priorities that we put together for our 2022-23 school year. So out of our evaluation meeting a couple months ago, Ted and Randy and I got together and we kind of drafted, really from Randy's notes, and Randy was the primary drafter and gave him a little input. We put together the priorities for the 22-23. We tried to really focus on what we heard from the group at those meetings, but also looked at ways to measure the priorities. And I think Randy did an excellent job with some of the forms that were put together by the administrators to help measure some of the priorities that we came up with this year. So, Randy, I don't know if you want to comment on them or...
If I can just take a minute just to kind of go through them, just for those of, for particularly those in the public who might not see what those are. Can I just have you pull up yep, there you go. We really identified, I think, 3 main priority areas. 1 was maintaining excellence, 2, diversity, equity, and inclusion, 3 was the referendum planning, and then just per talking to Joan afterwards and all the work that will be going into policy, we added the 4th one to continue the policy review. So the maintaining excellence piece, I mean, there was a few different pieces to that. 1 was to a focus on our staff, retaining and recruitment of our staff. I think that's a piece that Brian certainly will be continuing to work on, and it'll be a part that we'll be kind of putting some of our pieces together with in conjunction with the HR committee. Definitely a piece that we work on every day, but definitely an area we want to put some priority to, and I think some of the work there needs to be in conjunction between administration and the board. The second one was maintaining a budget that meets the priorities of the school district while staying within the budget parameters set by the budget committee and the board. I think that's really kind of how we've continued to move forward, but particularly as we've run into much tighter financial times, it's been a piece that we continue to keep out there as how we can maintain our excellence and how we manage our budget and our dollars. And the third piece was really identifying how do we continue our educational programs and student outcomes. And this was a piece I posed to my administrative team to say, you know, the priority of the board is wanting to continue the excellence as part of our programmatic pieces, and we came up with really 2 areas that we felt were of primary focus. 1, to keep the educational programs focused, moving forward and looking at continuous improvement. It's a continued focus on our professional learning communities, or PLC piece. In your packet, you will see a document that we created, which was a rubric or a kind of a guide that shows us how each of our PLCs would be performing as far as kind of the process of working with within the guidelines of what a PLC is. So that's actually, it's not in there, it's actually in your board book. I had just printed it out here. And that's a piece that we've worked on. We started it actually a couple years ago, and then things happened the last 2 years. We picked it up this spring, and we're looking to implement it in the fall by having our PLCs at each of our buildings, then go through, assess kind of where they're at. Are they at the starting out, developing, deepening their understanding or sustaining their work, and creating a scoring piece for them to then, for us to focus on how do they continue to move forward and improve. But when you look at instructional work, as far as how we move instruction forward, it's really tied to those 4 questions of the PLCs, is what do you want kids to learn, otherwise their curriculum, how are you going to know if they've learned it, how are you going to assess it, and what are you going to do if they've already learned it. So those are your 4 primary questions. That's the focus of the PLCs. That's why we feel that's such an important piece of the work we do for continual improvement. The second part is then a continued focus on the social emotional learning, student mental health. It's definitely an area that we continue to see an area of focus for us. And Chris Mann provided me with some guidelines as far as what was in the student services areas that they're looking to continue to move forward with. One of the pieces that when Joan, Ted, and I met was, well, how do we kind of go forth with measuring that? There's definitely different tools that we have used over the course of the year. What I would ask from latitude with the board is for us to bring that back before school starts with really kind of a plan for how we're going to kind of track that throughout the year. I didn't want to add that in here as I was writing this piece, as there was a few pieces I didn't want to misspeak on, but I know that the data collection piece and how we're going to measure it's an important piece. But that can be looking at anything from from data that we receive on feedback from students. It can be referrals. It can be some of our disciplinary type data. There's a lot of things that can go into that, but I'd like to have a more robust plan to bring back to you before school starts that can articulate that. And then the other piece that came out of our discussion was really needing to have a better understanding for the community of really what the whole work is under the helping our students with social emotional learning and student mental health, and included that as part of our plan moving forward. So the first priority, the maintaining excellence, has a staff, the budget, and then the outcome pieces associated with our instructional programs.
And just for point of clarification,
Sure.
I didn't see the rubric. Did you say you attached this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You
a
can-
second,
Because I didn't see it in extras, and that wasn't on my.
it's,
It's actually right in, it should be right in,
right under the draft priorities,
Yeah.
there's a PLC rubric.
Okay, I'll go back.
yep. But if you just want to scroll down a little bit, you can kind of see how it's developed. It talks about the different characteristics of model PLCs, and then it starts to have we want each of our PLCs then to take a look at how they are performing and how they are working together. And
Randy, I think, you know, you improve what you measure, right?
Yeah, thank you.
right, that's the intent of that.
And I guess, you know, when we look at this, what would be nice to have is how many of these teams do we have in each building?
Correct.
You know, that are at these different levels.
Right.
And our goal would be to improve, you know,
That's right.
10% or 15%, whatever that is. Is that gonna be
So it's not- this is-
part of your
Yes, yes. what-
assessment? And then would you include that like in the, maybe on a quarterly basis in the board books?
Yeah, right now, what we are looking at is we haven't used this rubric yet, it's brand new. So we want to have a baseline with it right away, and so by the end of September, wanting to have all of our PLCs go through, address where they're at, and then from there, put together their plan for how they're going to move forward. And then what our plan is, Jack, is then to have a post-assessment, and I know that we usually have our board development, or our board review in April, having that taking place in the spring, so that you can see where our growth is. If you want to put some level, and I think after we get the baseline data, we can see kind of where we all fall, and then we can kind of assess from there. But right now, I don't have that. So this is kind of a baseline year to kind of develop that. But our goal is to continue to move people forward. And part of, I think, what we've talked about administratively is we kind of have an idea of where all of our PLCs are really performing. This is giving us a much more concrete way that we're now going to put it with our group, with our staff, to then be assessing themselves, administration to be working with them, and then putting plans in place for how they improve. But what you'll see at the board level is exactly what you just articulated. As a baseline, how many of our PLCs are scoring at each of the levels, and then as a post piece, how have we moved them forward? And then I think from there we can, and if there's a piece where we want to put some measurable piece to that, we can discuss that part. But I think this is kind of our baseline piece to see where we're at, and then needing to move it forward with more concrete pieces. And it's really meant with the same purpose that you just said. If we put attention to it, we're measuring it, we're accountable to it, it causes us to focus on it more intelligently. That was the intent.
Good, thanks.
Okay. And then if you go to the next priority, I'm going to kick you back to the other document. This was the DEI priority, and really what this was built off of was, again, our discussion at the board's eval meeting, was to really looking at our recommendations from the DEI ad hoc committee's report and dividing out and delegating out those recommendations to our committees. We want to do that this summer. Each board committee will then review kind of their work, have their recommendations that will then find their way back through the board's DEI committee and then to the full board for consideration. I think as we look at those, that each committee is going to have to decide kind of the prioritization of what those are. Some of those recommendations have been accomplished already, some haven't been, and then prioritizing kind of where we're going to put forth our efforts. But that'll be something coming out of each of our committees, and we'll be working on that this summer. The referendum planning, I think, this pretty much speaks for itself. It's really with gearing all the way up for between now and the end of August for getting those resolutions in place, putting forth the scope of the work, and then once it is approved, moving forward with all of the operational pieces to put that forth successfully. And then the fourth priority is the policy review. That's a big piece for our policy committee, and I think that was a good suggestion, Joan, to have that added, that will continue to move those pieces forward throughout the year.
So I would like us to approve these, but I know many of you are seeing them for the first time tonight. You were part of the discussion, so we could do it kind of like we do policy as 2 readings. You could, after seeing them and kind of hearing the discussion, think about them until July. I feel approving them tonight or July is probably both fine.
Either one's
If there's anything you want to add or delete from this list, this is, I think, an important document that we, move forward and really hold tight to. So, is it better to wait until next month, or are you ready to adopt them? or-
I just think this is one of the best drafts I've seen of a priority, setting out what we're gonna do. I really like them, but I think I'd like a chance to think a little bit.
Okay.
Approve them in July.
Sure,
I would second that.
wait until July. And that's kind of what I kind of felt, that it's a lot, and it's a lot of work to
But
embark
it's succinct,
on.
it's really, I think it covers,
Yeah, I hope it's what we
Yeah.
talked about and what the flavor of that evaluation meeting kind of brought out, but, so, take them with you, think about them, if there are any concerns, contact Randy or I, and then we'll approve them in July. Okay, moving on, Randy would just like to do a quick update on school safety based on some of the recent developments in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, after our last board meeting, over the last month, we've obviously had all the tragic events in Texas. I think as Joan, Ted, and I talked about it, we just wanted to recognize that tonight. There's been a few questions that have come forward with regards to how the school really approaches school safety, how we approach kind of the planning around all of those pieces. And I just wanted to kind of point people back to that. In March, we did hold a community engagement meeting. I included in the board packet here tonight both the link to the actual meeting where you can watch it on video. It's about an hour long. And then it also has, we have attached the presentation that we utilize there. I've had a few questions from community members if we would turn over or give them our safety plan. Well, we're not going to do that for safety reasons. I mean, there's certainly things in there that we want to assure the public that we do. And I think you can see those through some of the presentation pieces that I've attached to our board book here tonight. But we also want to be cautious that we're not laying out information that can be used counter to some of the things that we're putting in place. But I can state that this is obviously an area that we put a lot of time to, that put a lot of thought to. We're also at the point where we're continuing to evaluate and evolve around that work. As an administrative team, one of the things that we want to look at this summer is working with some of the members of our municipalities to do some tabletop exercises this summer that can help us to walk through, in the event of different types of emergencies, either community-wise or school-wise, they all impact school. And how can we make sure that we're the best prepared for those pieces? So obviously we keep the folks in Texas and around the country that find themselves in the midst of these tragedies, and we're trying to keep all of our students and our staff and our community as safe as we're able to by evaluating our practices. We did meet with members of our police department here a few weeks ago as part of the safety committee that we have in the district. Had some conversations about have any practices changed over time as they've kind of reviewed things from a law enforcement best practice perspective. Generally, they haven't. They've been pretty solid the last few years. There are a few things that we are evaluating, whether there are some better ways that we can do them and train our staff, et cetera. But other than that, I just wanted to kind of put out there that there's information that you can reference on a longer presentation that we did. And if people do have questions, they're always welcome to contact either their building administrator, myself, Steve Summers, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Randy. And I believe I will turn that over to you again for our, is it our last COVID update?
Our last COVID update, I think, is what we're going to try to title it here tonight. And I don't have a lot to share. I mean, what I've pulled together today is just, and it's, if you can make it a little larger and just go all the way, oh, I think we got to go all the way to the bottom there, Rebecca. So if you look at today's date, this is just community data, and it shows that we have 4 incidents here today, community-wise. That's everything. That's not just the school district students. That's entire community, 20+ thousand people. You have a weekly average of just under 9. You can see the trends of what's occurred over the last month or so. I think certainly that those are all things that we've continued to track. Generally where we are as a district is really starting to kind of move forward with treating this as we do many other illnesses, making sure that we're communicating with families that if they're not feeling well, they should keep their children home. But as far as the notifications and all of those things, we feel we've come to kind of the end of doing those pieces. And certainly we'll be working with families as any incidents come forward and do that through our nursing staff. But we've worked really closely with them. They've done an absolutely phenomenal job. I mean, those folks were really kept us moving forward as a school district, kept us open, kept us keeping kids healthy. So I can't say enough about our nursing and our health staff. But I know that they're looking forward to kind of move on to the next stage as well. And I feel that's really where we are as a district.
Perfect.
That's my update.
Thank you, Randy. Moving on to committee reports, starting with HR. We've had actually 2 HR meetings since our last meeting.
Right, we had 2 things that we're bringing forward to the board that the committee agreed on. One is the guidelines. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, there's, again, the 3 employee handbooks or employment guidelines were attached. And so we have the teacher's handbook, the hourly staff handbook, and the admin and admin support handbook. And again, different levels of edits were included in them, but there are 2 overview documents that helped highlight them, as opposed to going through them item by item. I guess I'm willing to take any questions that folks might have about it.
Is Frontline the new program we're using that was mentioned in the
For
hourly employee, I think?
True time.
True Time is the electronic timekeeping system.
Okay.
Frontline is the platform that our teaching staff would use for educator effectiveness, and then we
Okay.
also use that as it was formerly known as ASOP. It's the substitute request
Okay.
platform.
All right. And then I did see an editing error.
Yeah, there's again formatting and all the above, but I would certainly list if you notice something in particular. I'd
Page
appreciate it.
36 of the teacher handbook. Line 24 on page 36, and line 32, I think it was on the following page, when it listed the change in pay. In the parentheses, it listed, it didn't cross out the 4.
Yep,
And
so
so it looks like
actually I see it, yep,
6,460.
Yep, correct.
So, just a little difference.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, yes, that should be, yes, as it says, in the text, 660,
Right.
not 6,460, yes.
Okay.
So
Just-
that 4 should have a strike through in there for sure.
Thank you, Mark, for reading so closely.
Up all night, huh?
And as I kind of mentioned in summary, the documents themselves certainly show, they're not pretty right now, right? They show the previous language strike through, and when the edits are accepted, they merge together, and they would, obviously, it becomes a lot more visually appealing. But as I mentioned to the HR committee, we're also going to be digitizing the handbooks instead of a PDF. so that it's searchable by section moving forward, and so it will look different, kind of do that in conjunction with the new website, which is coming forth soon.
So with these changes, modifications, what kind of budget impact does it have? Is it neutral or?
There would be an increased cost, with, you know, for example, the retirement benefit would show an increased cost. These were following through on the 3-year plan that we started in the 19-20 school year, which was the advancement of different financial aspects of the handbook based on a schedule. And then they'll be reviewed again after next year when we do the 4th and final set of adjustments. So there is an increased cost to them. The total number I don't have in front of me at this point. But it was something that we did review. The board also reviewed when we put it into place and started in 1920. I just didn't bring that forward, I apologize.
Any other questions on these? You would like us to approve these tonight?
That was what we had discussed
Yeah,
within the committee.
because I know that you have quite a bit of work to.
Yeah, it would be, you know, with a review at the committee level and then a reading and review here, we could advance, you know, you as a board can advance it, put it into place, and then obviously any part of an agreement can be edited throughout the year, or any part of a handbook can be edited throughout a year. Or if there are aspects of it that you wanted me to bring back a second time, I certainly could do that. But for efficiency, we would like to put them in place now, have them in place for July 1 when they take effect.
Make a motion, we approve all the handbooks. Second.
Any other questions on any language in them? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Brian. Are you also going to do the consideration of the furnish availability?
Go ahead.
I am. And so, you know, another item that we discussed at the committee level is following through with an action at the wellness clinic that, when it was initially designed, was in mind, which was that the clinic itself would be available to all of our regular employees and without cost to them, in order to improve our organizational wellness and also just continue to be another reason, benefit that we're offering to attract employees to us. SSM and Dean have been able to advance the technology that they use so that it now is something that is actually available to us to make a change. And then the other part, obviously, is our employees tell us that one of the reasons that it's highly attractive is that it's not only the high-quality care they receive, it's highly accessible to them. And, you know, we tend to vary slightly by month throughout the year, but, you know, we're averaging around mid to high 30s in appointment. Hours of operation are filled with appointments. And if we kind of extrapolate adding our regular employees into the mix and their usage trends at the same rate that those that are using it now and are eligible to use it now, our appointments would go into the mid to higher 40s, which would still leave a very accessible amount of time for people to walk in and have access to the clinic, and would be a good use of our district's resources that we're putting into it. More, you know, obviously there's a tipping point. You make it too busy, too hard to get into, it becomes a lot like a regular clinic. But if it's accessible and there's time, we would like to use it more, so it's just the benefits are felt by more and are good for all.
Brian, if I'm a spouse who has different insurance than our district coverage, but will I still have access whether I'm a teacher or with your proposal non-teacher?
So access currently is anyone that has our health plan and the family of anyone that's enrolled in a health plan. They would obviously continue to be there, and then our regular employees would have access as well, even if they're not on our health plan.
Okay,
It would not extend to their families.
right,
Um,
just to the individual.
Yeah, so it would be regular employees, and then those covered under a health plan.
Got it.
I make a motion that we accept the wellness opening to the whole district.
Second.
Any other questions, concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Brian. Next committee to report is our DEI committee.
We don't have any action requests. Essentially, biggest part of the meeting, we listened to our student services, talk about the services they provide our students, with a big emphasis on the SEL program. Next steps we see that we'll be working on is a leadership conference, working on a mission statement and framework to support it, and the heavy-duty thing of going through the items from the former Dei Committee and that are our domain, and seeing how we're gonna work those things out.
Thank you, Mark. I would just like to add for board members, if you didn't get a chance to attend, that would be a great recording to listen to learn more about the SEL program. Chris Mann and her staff did a great presentation, and I thought it was very informative and something that, you know, we get questions frequently about our SEL program, and I think that would really answer a lot of things. So I would just recommend you watch it. Moving on to Policy Committee.
Policy, as you know, we're in the process of rewriting policies. It's actually on one of our priorities for board. We're going to be in the 300 and 400 series that we're working on, and Randy in a bit could talk about that. I think he's already our process of how we're going to be going through that. But in addition to that, we've seen Chris Mann, our Director of Student Services, has brought some kind of higher need items of things that we've kind of run into that we don't really have policies in place, that she was requesting some of these policies, so she would like some action items on those policies. And if you want to maybe cover them, or she could.
I'll ask
speak to them.
Chris to come on up, and then I'll introduce him, and then if there's questions, Chris can fill in the blanks. The first one is on services and programs for English learners, policy 342.7. You've heard a lot about our growing needs with our English language learners, and Chris has identified, particularly as we're moving into a bilingual program, that we need some policy that gives us some direction. So this is a new policy that she worked on. It was reviewed by the committee and approved for recommendation here today. So if there's any questions on that policy, Chris is right here to answer them for you.
Mark.
Yeah, Chris, with regard to the program, it says, if we have a sufficient number of students. So what is that number? Should that be in the policy? Should there be, it's really, to me, it's vague. It gives a lot of flexibility to say yay or nay.
It is vague at this time because we are in the process of planning a bilingual program, and we will update the policy then once we have that programming in place. A lot of this touches on how we identify English learners as well, and accommodations, enrollment, all of that will remain. But that little blurb, you're right, that we don't know what our bilingual program will look like yet, and so that it's pretty vague.
So some of the policies you see coming forward here tonight, you may see back in front of you in the not-so-distant future. But we felt we need to get something in place so that we have a place to start as we go into the school year.
So as we go through these, if we're ready, we could approve them
Yes.
tonight?
Yep.
So does anybody want to make a motion to approve this?
Motion to support.
Second.
Any questions on?
All of them
that
or just the
policy?
one?
Just that one.
Let's take them one at a
We're just gonna do
time.
one at a time. Any questions on that one? All in favor of approving policy 342.7, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. So the student experience homelessness.
Yeah, this is a very similar policy. This is one we did not have policy on. Chris obviously has seen, we've always had homeless students in Waunakee, identified per the Kinney-Vintro Act, but we didn't have any specific policy to it. So she's gone forward and put forth a policy that was again reviewed by the committee and is recommended to the board. So any questions? Kurt?
I'm sorry.
No.
But the policy refers to the district liaison, which I know who that person is, but it also refers to the, let me get it straight here. I can't make a move. I apologize. There's
There's
two
two people,
liaisons.
right?
Is it the
Yep.
high school?
We have a district homeless liaison, that is Jessica Main. She is a social worker,
Okay.
district-wide social worker, and then I am also a liaison for the district.
Okay, all right.
So she works directly with our students who are in transition, they're experiencing homelessness, and then she pulls me in for difficult, challenging situations.
So for clarity and policy, should it state that what position the school social worker or a school social worker for point of clarity? I know when I looked at for harassment, I mean, it was very specific who the person should go to. And it just seemed a little unclear to me if we're gonna have the role, shouldn't it be defined by a specific, at least saying the school social, one of the school, district social workers?
We have 7 school social workers. Her title is specifically ATODA and homeless liaison. So it's in her title, and she's not in a building as a social worker.
Okay.
Although this year she does have 4K as well. So when we have her, when we put that on our website, it does say district homeless liaison, ATODA, 4K social worker.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're ready to move this one forward, I need a motion. Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. So student mental health.
This is actually a rewrite of a policy. I know this is an area that we've definitely had more attention placed to recently. And as Chris has reviewed this, I think this really kind of focuses on some of the suicide and suicidal ideation issues and how what our processes are for moving those pieces forward and how we support students who experience those. So this is obviously a rewrite. Chris, do you want to just talk a little bit about kind of what went into your rewrite and then open it up for questions?
Sure. The student mental health and wellness rewrite was to align it more with the SEL work we're doing and the mental health work we're doing, and reframing that to that universal practices, selective practices, and intensive services that we talk about when we're aligning with the DPI mental health framework. So that policy, we just reworded a lot with PBIS, SEL, kind of opening that up to more general on the continuum of supports we offer. And then the suicide prevention procedures, during the 1920 school year, we had a team work on updating our suicide assessment protocols. It was mainly with student services. And then we continued that work through COVID and really pushed out some PD for our staff around addressing suicide ideation. We wanted to align our procedures to the updated suicide risk assessment process that we follow. So that's how we got to that.
Any questions?
So this is 457, correct?
457, correct.
Yes.
Okay. Can you pull up the document, because I can't get it online? Okay, can you scroll down to?
Okay.
You're okay?
I'm
I know that the policy committee also received a public comment with regards to this policy, and it was with regards to like child abuse and reporting. And those are some things that definitely are on our radar as we're looking at some of our other policies. But there's other policy documents that also address that, and we'll review that when we get to those policy pieces.
So I move that we accept the policy 457.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, so our expense reimbursement.
Can I ask one question, please? So
Yeah.
you just approved policy 457, but did you approve policy 457 rule?
I would say
I just want to make sure they're current.
yep, I think it
Yeah,
would be both.
we're good.
Yep.
So expense reimbursement policy,
Expense reimbursement policy 671.2. I know Steve and Ally, you've worked on this one. This was just with regards to revising some things that we've seen within the business office as far as how we would like to look at the reimbursement levels for folks who are traveling, and also depending on where the source of those funds are coming from. Steve or Ally, do you want to kind of provide a high-level overview, and then we'll open it up for questions?
Sure, we did receive some feedback from some federal grants that we received that the level of reimbursement approved by the grant exceeded the level of reimbursement allowed by our policy. So we did request a revision that basically stated that grant funds may receive reimbursements following this policy, or the amount that is approved by their grant if that amount is higher. We also received feedback regarding student trips that were out of state, as our policy references costs for the state of Wisconsin. The policy committee did provide some feedback on that topic, and we revised the language that is included in this draft based on that feedback from the committee. So the committee requested, Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind scrolling back up, requested having an approval process, and what we did is we are using the rates that are approved by the federal government for the out-of-state location that student group is traveling to, if it is higher. So example, if a student group is traveling to New York City, we'd have the ability to look at what the federal rates are for New York City. If it is higher than our policy, then those rates would apply. For student-related trips, and again, those are fundraised trips, not using taxpayer funds. That feedback was received by the committee, and we did make that revision that we're presenting this evening.
Steve, are those the GSA rates?
Yep.
Should you have that in there someplace, GSA, federal GSA
I think
schedule?
it says US GSA.
Yeah.
In the logo, yeah, that's what it's referencing, but if that could be clear, we'd certainly be happy to do that.
Okay.
okay, so are we ready to adopt this?
Move to support.
Second.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions on that? You're good, Jeff?
I'm fine. I just suggested maybe you put the website in there so that
Oh.
people can go
Good
directly
idea.
to it.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you.
Great.
Proof of residency.
Yeah, proof of residency, this is a request that came from our registrar, Julie Gangler. If you want to pull that one up, please, Rebecca. This is as she's starting to register students, a few things that she and her colleagues in other districts have recognized is just the shifting way that people can sign up and change their address on different forms. And this really is addressing kind of the bullet point in the middle of the page of not accepting telephone, cable, or cell service as a proof of residency, because those are all things you can just go online and change your address, print them out. They're not things that you're necessarily seeing that really give you a true proof of residency. We also wanted to articulate that if you are bringing in a real estate bill, it needs to be a residential real estate bill versus something that would be more of a commercial or other piece. So as we start to look at just residency and having to prove residency when people are moving to our district, this was a piece that we felt was important to bring forward, particularly as we're getting into the season where we're enrolling kids. So this was recommended by our registrar, and I know that this is something that other districts have also followed suit.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Rebecca, you have somebody? Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And we have a flag policy update.
There's no action on this item tonight. We've had the flag policy in front of us for a number of months. I think what we had put it on a hold until we could review what was coming out of the U.S. Supreme Court in the Boston case. That case has now been resolved, but unfortunately, it doesn't really make it super clear. So there's a few things that we have to really kind of work through as we kind of determine how we want to move forward, either from a practice standpoint and or a policy standpoint, and probably both. When I had a conversation with Kirk Strang, who's our attorney, to kind of work through some of these pieces and understand it so I could present it to our committee. And it really starts to bridge out into what type of speech is being articulated when you are flying a commemorative flag on a flagpole. Is it public speech, or is it government speech, or private speech or government speech? And the definition between those is very thin. And so that was a piece that we talked about for quite a bit at our committee level, and I just wanted to bring it back here to state that this is really going to be a piece in process. And in order to help the board and the committee through that, I really want to have our attorney present to discuss what those two things are. And to talk about, in the absence of policy, and as you are flying a flag or doing where we are now, how does that fit within the new definitions that are coming out of the Boston case? I think the hope was that case would kind of clarify things for us. It did to some respect, in that it defined really some of the parameters of government and private speech, but it also creates a piece where we have to fully understand what both of those things mean before we move forward. And that's a piece that I was able to articulate to our committee, and I'd really like to have Kirk come forward and really explain it either to the committee or the full board or both, and then we can make some decisions moving forward. But it's just to let you know, it's still in process, and it has some legal complexities to it that I think we have to understand before we adopt any policy. And if there's a point where we do want to adopt policy on this, I would ask that we probably have one of our attorneys script it. So it's going to need to have that kind of language to it.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep.
Moving on to curriculum committee.
Okay, well, we talked about several things, but one thing that we want to bring to the board tonight, and Tim Awesome is going to come and share with us, is a consideration of instructional planning resource flow chart that I think you'll explain to the group.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Tim.
And so, what we have up here on the screen is titled our Supplemental Instructional Resource Flow Chart. This is really intended to include not only supplemental instructional resources, but also to provide some thinking or decision-making guidance for instructors around classroom activities as well. And kind of the background on this is, as we've looked at questions that have come up in our schools, when we've looked at situations that have occurred in our neighboring districts, we've realized that there is a benefit in providing some kind of more formalized guidance for our teachers when they are tackling certain types of activities, certain types of resources, and certain types of topics, both to make sure that they're stepping through this and maybe slowing down the decision-making process, and also to provide some confidence for them that if they do step through this process, they're following an overall framework that we've laid out. So I know this is very small, and bless you if you worked the magnifying function in Board Book and looked at this in great detail. But you'll see it references our policies at the top. And you'll notice at the top, our first set of questions are focusing on our curriculum itself. You know, is this something that is in line with our expectations for the course or the grade level? Is the information accurate and research-based? Is the vocabulary appropriate? And is it really suitable for the audience? And if any of those kind of gatekeeper questions are no, it automatically defaults to select a different resource or a different activity. But then if the question to all of that is yes, then we go down to that green box. And that green box contains a list of potentially sensitive and controversial topics, and says, so if the resource or activity involves these, we kind of need to take an additional lens to the resource or to the activity. And again, it's not that we don't engage in providing our students introduction to critical thinking, to meaningful topics. We want students to understand different perspectives, to maybe move out from comfortable pre-assumptions and deal with kind of a range of perspectives. But we still need to make sure that it's being done in a manner that recognizes the different experiences that kids have, that anticipates concerns that might come up. If we think that the topic, if handled in a certain way, has a potential to have some negative implications for kids in the class, we want the teacher to kind of think through how they can work through that up front, maybe in terms of front-loading content with the students, potentially in some prior notification to families. It really depends on the topic and the age of the student. And then it just brings us back down through some other pieces at the bottom. And at the bottom of this, in kind of the reddish section, it recognizes that despite the best intentions, sometimes something can occur that's not always positively received, and provides guidance on what to do should that happen. Because if something has led to negative feelings, we want to address that promptly and appropriately and not complicate the matter further. So this is intended to be a resource. It's not intended to be something that a teacher or a course planning team would reference every day, but it is intended to be something that when they were tackling certain topics, or potentially redesigning a unit or designing a new unit that dealt with topics kind of included in the center of the document, this would be something they would break out for their conversations. Along with that, we have, and it's linked to here, a readiness rubric that's really kind of a reflective tool for educators and their course teams around their own readiness to take on this work. I kind of situate myself back when I was in the classroom as a social studies teacher. I taught global studies. And in the course of teaching global studies, you have to wrap into your course a wide variety of topics and cultures, most of which I did not have personal lived experience with. And so to do that well, I needed to kind of acknowledge my readiness, my blind spots that I might have, and how I would go about that. So that's the purpose in this. These two pieces, although drawing from source material from other districts, have gone under well more than a year of review, primarily by our department chairs, in conjunction with Amy Johnson and myself, to make sure they represented where we wanted to go as a district on these topics. And so there's been involvement from our teacher leadership. We brought these for administrative review involving our principals, associate principals, and other administrators in May, and it went to the curriculum committee earlier this month. And again, we see this as a support for our teachers. We see this as a way to provide additional supports for instructional planning, and hopefully make sure we continue to do a high-quality job of teaching topics that are both relevant to students and also, you know, deal with topics in a manner that represents an acknowledgement that there are different perspectives and different experiences. So there's a lot here, and you know, I think as noted in the agenda, you know, one question we did ask the committee, and I think is, do you see this as something that's really an administrative document? Is this something where, as a board, you want to take a formal position? But I will say a lot of work has gone into it. Our plan would be, once we know we're moving forward with it, we would plan how we would roll it out during the back-to-school period in August. Instructional coaches play an important role, we feel, in introducing this to teachers, and also, in the event of questions, serving as resources for teachers. So that's kind of the overall summary on this. You know, certainly, if you have questions, I'd be happy to do my best to work through those with you.
I mean, I see it as a guide. I would imagine you'd get challenged on some of the things, like information is accurate, well, who makes that call? Resources suitable, again, who makes that, the one doing this assessment, they're going through it, it's like, oh, I totally thought it was fine, but those are things that I'm sure there's gonna be plenty of, it's up for interpretation kind of thing, but it's a good, I guess, checklist you can go through to get, you know, to follow it, to get to a certain process. It gives you a process to follow, I guess.
I would use it as a administrative tool.
Yeah.
You know, give it to your instructional coach. This is how we work through these curriculum issues.
I think it's meant to just get people thinking. I mean, so that you can, before you do something, you stop and you have to think through how does it fit into these pieces. I think that's kind of the intent, and then there's also the piece that we do put in there is, if you have questions, please ask. And I think those are some of the things that we feel are really important as we start to move forward, and that's kind of the first piece in kind of helping our staff being able to kind of discern some of the topics that they're trying to address in the classroom.
I guess to that point though, and Ted brings up a good point, right, is, you know, whose opinion, you know, how do you ferret through that to say, yeah, this is appropriate?
Well, and I think, you know, that's a question that I think, you know, now is more salient than ever, because, you know, we live in a time where, you know, the process of kind of sifting and winnowing, which, you know, does take time and it takes a certain objectivity, that's still valued by many, but we do live in a time where some people seem very eager to kind of take positions, sometimes I think for the sake of taking positions. You know, what I would say, you know, from an educator's perspective is, as an educator, either individually or collectively as a course team, you need to take stock of what are my potential preconceptions coming to the topic. You know, both in terms of experiences I have, experiences I don't have that might be influencing my lens on this. You know, do I have beliefs? I mean, we all have beliefs, but as professionals, it's important for educators to be able to put those beliefs in a certain space and bring it into the classroom in an objective manner. I mean, I always prided myself when I was in the classroom in making it very challenging for my students on a current event topic or on a major topic in history to really feel comfortable with knowing where I stood on an issue. That was not my purpose. My purpose was to facilitate their critical thinking. Now, I think when you do have topics where there are different perspectives, that's where it's important for teachers to review what the current scholarship is. You know, is the scholarship reputable? You know, is it well cited? What are the sources? What's the credibility of the sources? Now, in some cases, that's not a particularly hard endeavor. But in some cases, you're gonna have to go a little deeper, and, you know, if you are questioned on it, you should be able to say, well, here's the resource I chose, or here's the activity that I chose, here's our purpose instructionally for doing it, here's the resources underpinning this work, here's where they come from, and here's why we think it's sound. And I think, you know, by and large, if you look at, you know, what we bring through, you can see that we tend to bring through things that come from well-established author teams, people that represent current scholarship, really in all of our areas. But that's how you're going to try to approach the question as an educator. Now, some people may want to trust but verify, and they'll take your information away, and they'll look at it for a few days to a few weeks, and they'll come back. Others, you know, despite your best work, they might not always see it the same way. I've always felt as long as you're transparent about it and you can explain, you know, what you're doing, you've probably done your job as a teacher. I think it's very difficult on many topics to get 100% agreement in this day and age. But again, I think it's important to recognize that our focus is to not instruct our kids in what to think on any given topic. It's to build their ability to form ideas, to hold contrasting views, and evaluate evidence. It's not to kind of go this way or that way.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for this document. I think it will help staff, give them some structure and guidelines. So I appreciate your leadership in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tim.
Moving on to the Budget Committee, and maybe I can just turn it over to Steve and Ally. I know Jack missed that meeting as chair, so would you mind taking that, Steve?
Sure, thank you, Joan. There are a few agenda items that the committee is moving forward for consideration this evening. The first one is budget changes. This is a process we follow once a year to bring forward budget changes for consideration by the school board. There is a process that is put forward by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. We've attached that. It is published in the paper. If approved by the board tonight, Ally will work with the paper and get it published so the community can see what those changes were. Ally worked through the process of getting these changes updated in our district financial system. And I know she'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has about the work that went into this topic.
And if there are no questions, we do need approval of these changes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you.
This next topic is another once-a-year topic, the consideration of fund balance classification. We do ask the school board to approve prior to the close of our fiscal year, which is on June 30th, the accounts that we present to the district audit firm that can be used to identify our fund balance moving forward. Last year, as an example, the board recommended the addition of setting aside funds in our fund balance for the Warrior Pitch turf replacement. So that was new last year. At this point this year, we do not have any recommended changes. We are recommending continuing with the practices that the school board has approved in the past, but we do not have any recommended changes for this year. The Budget Committee did recommend approval on a 2-0 motion for this agenda item.
So move, we approve.
Second?
Any questions on this classification? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. So the second draft of the budget?
We did have an opportunity to review the second draft of the budget with the budget committee. We talked about the changes that were made in the second draft. We talked about what we were looking to bring forward in the third draft of the budget, which takes place in July. Ally prepared the document for the committee and talked through some of the changes. She did highlight everything that changed between the first and second draft in yellow. And I know would be happy to answer any questions from any of the board members on this topic.
If not, we do need approval of the second draft.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the second draft? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. And then we have some lease agreements yet.
So the committee also recommended approval of the district lease agreements. We attached the lease agreements with the Wisconsin Youth Company and the new teacher center. Dane County has their own lease agreement form that they use, so you don't see that attached. We do receive that from them. In the past, the budget committee has requested that we adjust the Wisconsin Youth Company lease on an annual basis. So you'll see the recommendation to move that from $2,700 to $2,800 per building, and this was moved forward from the committee for board consideration tonight.
Can anyone explain what the Dane County New Teacher Project is?
Sure. That's actually a collaborative with all the Dane County schools. One of the things we have to do is provide mentorship and training for our new staff. And that's some of the things that we do for our licensing requirements, but it's also a piece that we do to support our new staff so that they're successful in the classroom and that they're staying within the profession. So it's a collaborative of districts that kind of pool their resources to then support all of our new teachers as they're entering the profession. And then we also have a component to that we have on-site mentors that are separate from that, but are a piece that the district provides that are support to them as they're entering their first years into the profession. And it's a really great program. And when I look back at when I started teaching, I wish we'd have had something of that nature to support folks. And it's everything from instructional pieces to classroom management to any of the other current events that are kind of happening and just preparing them for being successful in the classroom.
Move we approve all of these agreements.
Second.
Any questions on those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
If I can just add one thing to Ted's question, I'm also the fiscal agent for that group. So we serve as the group that collects the funds from all the districts, and their office is housed here in Waunakee. So that's why we have the lease.
Okay, moving on to administrative reports. The reimbursement expenditure proceeds.
I think I'll turn this one over to Steve as well, but this is a piece that we've been talking to you about for a few months. We had some public comments on it tonight. We're not asking for any action on this evening, as we will present something at our second meeting this month where you'll get a better picture of kind of what your options are around the resolution. But this is if we do decide to move forward with it, there are some specific things within the resolution, how it is written, and we work with Quarles and Brady to put that piece together. Steve, do you want to talk through a little bit of the process of what we have in front of us, and then what we'll be doing at the second meeting in June here that'll help the board kind of decide if this is a direction we want to move?
Thank you, Randy. So what we did include in your board book tonight was a draft of what a reimbursement resolution looks like, because we know this is something that doesn't come up very often. In fact, the last time we did this as a school board was back in 2014 when the referendum was proposed to the community, and this type of an approach was used for the Prairie Elementary School portion of the 2014 referendum. So this isn't something that comes up a lot. But the overall intent of looking at a reimbursement resolution is for a school board or a governing body that were to pass something like this to reimburse that form of government for expenditures related to a bond issue that is approved at a later date. So as an example, if the referendum were to be approved in November, the school board would likely be approving debt related to that referendum probably sometime in December. A reimbursement resolution would allow the school board to take proceeds from that borrowing to pay back the school district's general fund or our general education fund for upfront fees and costs associated with said referendum. That cannot be done unless a school board actually were to pass something similar to what you see on the screen. It is a requirement in order to pay back a district's general fund budget for costs related to a referendum. But it's important to note that a reimbursement resolution in and of itself is not required for a referendum. So you could have a referendum and begin design after the referendum is passed, and in that scenario, you would not need a reimbursement resolution. So when the board initially went through the process for requests for proposals for architectural services, the architectural firms, including Epstein Ewen, identify a pre-referendum fee that was shared with the board in the proposal, and then fees associated after the referendum. So what you saw at the May special board meeting was a timeline that was based on the concept of some of that design that typically would occur, let's say this winter, moving forward from July until October, which would then necessitate the concept of a reimbursement resolution. What we are intending to share with the board 2 weeks from tonight is a timeline so that you could see what it would look like if we didn't do something like this. So you could see a timeline that would go towards what I'll call a more traditional approach, which is you have pre-referendum services from an architectural firm, you take a referendum to the public, and then you begin design. So we would want to have the opportunity for Epstein Ewen and Vogel Brothers to share that schedule with you, so you could see what that would look like, as well as continue the discussion about the timeline that they did show at the meeting in May. So the point of showing this tonight is just to have this again out in front of you so you can see this, be prepared for the discussion. This may or may not be necessary depending on the timeline that the board decides that you would like to proceed in moving forward. So we will be bringing this back for discussion in 2 weeks, but just know there is a potential path that would be connected to a reimbursement resolution, and we will also show you a timeline or a path that would not require a reimbursement resolution. And then as a board, we would like to understand your thought process as to whether or not you would like something like this presented to you as an action item at a future meeting so you could act on it if you felt that timeline was the one that you wanted to pursue. So we'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, just intended to be a general discussion about the concept, and we will continue it in 2 weeks. Mark?
So Steve, if we do walk the path of wanting this reimbursement resolution, they would have the plan for Heritage completed prior to the referendum as a part of a piece of the explanation of the referendum. Is that kind of, or would it be completed after the fact?
In general, the intent would be to move that typical process that would occur after a referendum as much prior to the date as possible so that the bidding process could begin pretty close to the referendum being passed. So the intent with the 800,000 that was discussed at the meeting would be to do as much as possible of that design prior to November to be ready to go with the bidding process. Again, related to that potential timeline of September of 2024 for the heritage portion of the project.
It's really, Mark, driven by more of what your timeline is for when you want to open the school and when you're comfortable opening the school versus trying to have something ready for the time the vote takes place. But when you think back to like when the intermediate school was done and we had the teacher visionary teams and all, that's what we're talking about. So you need to have those pieces moving in order to hit a timeline of fall of '24. We'll show you alternative timelines in a couple of weeks. That would be without a resolution. So we'll be able to show you both pathways and then we can make a decision.
Jeff?
You know, I guess one of the things that I'd like to see when we talk about this in the next couple of weeks is as we go into these timelines, you know, what are our student counts? You know, so that we're, you know, what are our future student counts? Because really, one of the things, if we can push this off, you know, months, I'm not saying years, but if we can do that, we're probably in a better position from the inflation standpoint. Because, you know, if we do this, you know, we want to run right out of the gate, we're probably still in the upward swing of inflation. If we push it off, you know, another year or you know, now we're starting to come down because, you know, just a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, you know, wood prices are starting to come down, you know, because of increased Federal Reserve actions. So, you know, I think as we think about this, you know, from the benefit of the taxpayer, you know, kind of, we have to look at those where we are. Because if gas continues to go up, you know, the economy's gonna come to a halt because people aren't gonna move, won't have the money to buy. So theoretically, it could be we're entering a recessionary period, depending upon what happens in the next 6 months.
Right. Yep, and that's fair. That's why we think it's important to bring kind of both of those pathways. Steve and I are going to be meeting with members of the Vogel team to talk about kind of their procurement of supplies. I know steel is one of their concerns as far as the availability of it. So that's a piece we'll talk through and then certainly kind of hit those timelines. It probably, I mean, with or without a resolution, that'll be part of what we want to have the dialogue with them about is what's the difference between them. I mean, if you're looking at it just from it's probably months, not years. Are you going to delay it 4, 5, 6 months? And then it just kind of articulates like when that school would open. So those are the conversations that I think we'll lay out for you, and then we can make a decision of which direction we want to go.
Any other questions on that? Thank you. So we have a pupil transportation handbook to approve. No changes were made.
We do request this once a year. We do seek any feedback out from the buildings. As far as any changes, we did not really receive any requests for changes this year. This actually gets integrated into the student handbook process, so we've always tried to approve this first. The majority of it is board policy. I mean, the overwhelming majority of this is board policy. It's just putting it in a form to really communicate it to families.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Consideration of the Dane County Driver Ed Scholarship Program.
This is just a continuation of a program we've participated in the past, and Dane County has put forth dollars to support economically disadvantaged students through driver's ed instruction. I mean, as you're probably aware, we don't offer driver's ed instruction through school. I mean, many years ago, that was eliminated from the aid formula as far as something that was supported by the state. So now people are on their own to get the training to get your driver's license. Dane County realized that some of our economically disadvantaged students weren't getting their license and then was prohibiting them, was a barrier to them finding work and traveling to work. So they're supplementing that. So this has been something we've participated in the past, and it's been greatly appreciated. So.
Motion to approve.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Correspondence,
Yep.
announcements?
There are a couple correspondence in your packet. You did see correspondence from Greta Shortreed, who's the state FBLA president, and just articulating kind of their acknowledgement of the accomplishments of our team and our FBLA. So thank you to all of those and for everybody who participates in that. That's a great program. I also received correspondence from a community member, John and Marge Dooley, who were just commenting that they contacted Jared Aker to see if there was someone, if he could refer some students to him to help with some landscaping. And he referred some students there who helped him out, and they were very appreciative and thought it was a great sentiment to our students in our community. And then today we received notification from, if you remember, well, probably last fall, Jack, when you, Tim and I and a group of our staff went and met with the engineering department at UW-Madison, and they were interested in writing a grant that would support robotics. And this was a grant that they were writing with a number of different colleges, Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, Georgia Tech, University of Iowa, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and the UW, and the grant was for, what is it, $2.5 million, and that was funded. And it's a piece that's going to help bring some of the STEM work that we've started in our Innovation Center. It's going to be some training with our staff, with Jeff and Kayla, and to be then being able to provide some additional training to other teachers around the area and across the state. So that's a very, very, very exciting program, and thanks for Jack for bringing us into contact with Dan Negret from the UW and all of his staff, and it was a super partnership. So.
Great, thank you.
What's pretty cool about that is Dan referred another of his colleague to talk with us, about a different part. So we're part of that program as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Very cool stuff.
And we are down to consent agenda. So we could do it all at once or pull out. I would like to acknowledge the gifts this evening. We have $1,500 from the McPherson family, kind of earmarked for Arboretum, the art department. Our State Bank of Cross Plains have Jean Days in April, and they have donated $300 plus 3 boxes of books for our elementary school. And our Pride Pump donation from Mefford Oil this month is another $1,000. So we always appreciate all those donations that our school receives. So anybody want to pull any of the items out? If not, I would take a motion for
Motion to approve.
the whole thing.
Second.
Any questions on anything in the consent agenda? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. So any legislative update?
I don't have any legislative updates, just looking at any future meetings.
Meetings.
Steve, do you have one already set, or do you need to
We
set?
did not set the budget committee because we wanted to get Jack's feedback. So we would like to meet prior to the July board meeting, but realize the 4th of July is in there. So at some point in prior years, the budget committee sometimes has met the day of the board meeting to avoid the 4th of July week, or sometime during the 4th of July week. It just depends on the plans for the members of the committee.
You want to try the morning of the board meeting? Or we-
The morning of the 11th,
Yeah.
that works for me.
And I'll be there this time.
I prefer not, but if that's the best for everybody, I can go along with it.
I'm in town the week before, so it doesn't matter.
I'm sorry?
I'm in town the week before, it doesn't matter to
The
me.
week before the 4th?
Were you the week before? Were you out of
Or the
town?
week of the 4th? Are you gone?
When is the 4th this year?
Monday.
4th is Monday.
Oh, yeah, later in the week would be fine.
Tuesday? Tuesday morning,
Tuesday
Mark?
the
What
fifth.
morning is good for you?
Let's-
Oh,
Let's not do Tuesday, let's do like Wednesday or Thursday.
Wednesday morning?
Wednesday's good, Thursday's good.
Wednesday's good for me. Wednesday morning, 7:30, 8.
4:30?
Jack, what do you like? 7:30,
7:30.
7:30.
7:30 would be great.
So that would be on the 6th. Anything else?
For right now, no policy. We'll meet in July. I'll send out proposed list of, we'd like to schedule out our policy ones for the year, given all the work that we have, but I'm not going to have anything with the 4th of July and some other things in here, so we'll schedule that at a later time.
Okay?
Any other committees?
No?
We scheduled, the curriculum committee rescheduled.
All right.
Curriculum is scheduled. We have the summer off from HR.
Nothing's gonna be done, right?
No challenges there, buddy.
No challenges. Brian's gonna hire 100 people and we're all sitting home.
All right.
Okay, so we are ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Oh my God.